forces dismantle a terror cell in the West Bank that was planning suicide bombings and shooting attacks. The group was overseen by the son of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. Global leaders descend on Davos, Switzerland, as the World Economic Forum opens its annual conference. Topics such as Europe's refugee crisis and combating terrorism will also feature on the agenda. And gunmen storm a university in northwest Pakistan, killing dozens of people. The Pakistani Taliban denies involvement in the attack. Good evening and welcome to the news today. It's Wednesday night and you're joining us live from the Jaffa Port. Israeli security forces say they dismantled a terror cell in the West Bank overseen by the son of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. The leader of the cell, Mahmoud Zalul, is said to have been recruited online from Lebanon. I-24 News defense correspondent Shai Ben-Ari reports.
Israel's Internal Security Service revealed Wednesday that a Hezbollah-financed terror cell was dismantled in the West Bank. The cell included 5 members, all residents of Tulkarem in the northern West Bank, who were tried in a military court last month and charged. The ringleader, 33-year-old Mahmoud Zalul, was enlisted online by Jawad Nasrallah, the son of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. Jawad is better known for his jihadist-inspired poetry than for any violent activity.
In the last war, we saw to what extent words can encourage and rise the spirits. They are just words, but the pen is mightier than the sword.
Zalul received directives by email from another Hezbollah operative known only as Fadi. Fadi is a member of the group's Unit 133, which plants and directs agents in foreign countries. His orders included preparing suicide bomb attacks and collecting information on Israeli security forces. Hezbollah transferred $5,000 to the cell for the purpose of carrying out attacks, and 2 of its members, Mohammed Bazarwa and Ahmed Abu Alaz, were arrested after acquiring a firearm, with the intent of using it against IDF soldiers. The Shin Bet says Hezbollah is intent on utilizing the current terror wave in Israel and the West Bank for its own interests. The militant Shiite group recently detonated explosives along Israel's border with Lebanon in an unsuccessful attack on an IDF patrol. Nobody was injured, but Hezbollah said the attack was a response to December's killing of its high-ranking operative, Samir Kuntar, in Damascus.
Yes, and joining me now in the studio are Amir Oren, defense and government analyst for Haaretz Daily. Good evening.
Evening, Ayman.
And our defense correspondent, Shai Ben-Ari. Good evening,
Good
Shai.
evening.
Amir, it's a name we haven't heard a lot of recently, especially not since the attack or the killing of Samir Kuntar. Is this the big comeback of Hassan Nasrallah?
Well, it's a family-owned business, apparently. You had the Murnia father and son combo. Both of them have been killed by Israel over the last 7, almost 8 years. Jihad Murnia and Imad Murnia. And you had Hassan Nasrallah and his other son, Hadi, who was killed in combat, in a clash with Israeli troops in Lebanon. And now comes the other son, who, following the demise of Samir Kuntar, is apparently in charge of overseeing operations within Israel and the West Bank. However, while this is a sexy item, the more important news in this regard was released a few minutes ago by the Israeli Defense Forces regarding a high-level exercise of the entire Northern Command, a 2-week exercise conducted in a scenario that pits Israel against both Daesh and other organizations, including Hezbollah, in Lebanon as well as in Syria. This is the Israeli Northern Front. So this is a strategic or at least operational problem for Israel. The very few cells which Hezbollah has managed to recruit online have not been very successful, but obviously Hezbollah is not going to relent.
Well, one of the reasons it is a sexy item, Shai, is because Israeli media reported today that this unit was operating under the radar, quote unquote. What do we know about this unit and how much grasp does Hezbollah have in the Palestinian territories?
Right. Unit 133 is, of course, the unit of Hezbollah really devoted to, you could say, covert operations beyond the borders of Lebanon. It is active, has been active really for a number of years already, without making too many headlines, in a number of different countries in the region, also in Egypt, in Jordan, in Israel a little bit, and in the West Bank, as well as Turkey, and even in Europe. It has been linked to the Burgas attack back in 2012. Now, this has been the case for a while already, but it's interesting to note this kind of plan to operate a terrorist cell in the West Bank. When you think about the similarities in strategy, when you see Hezbollah mired in the Syrian mess, it is not the only, of course, factor or group, you could say, that has entangled itself in that mess, Islamic State. And you see a similar shift in strategy with both of these groups. You see Islamic State getting itself into trouble in both Syria and Iraq, and you see them shifting towards a strategy where they operate cells in foreign countries. And it's interesting to see this strategy taken now by Hezbollah, even though it's not the first time.
You know, we tend to portray such units as shadowy and working undercover. Who knows, maybe an Israeli agent is running the whole unit. Only the other day, General Eisenkot, the Israeli Defense Forces Chief of Staff, pointed out in a public forum that the Israeli intelligence services have penetrated Hezbollah and that Hezbollah knows it. Now, this is part of psychological warfare, of course. Israel telling Hezbollah, we have penetrated you, start looking for our agents or our bugs or whatever. But nevertheless, Hassan Nasrallah is well aware of Israel's abilities, which doesn't mean that he will be deterred from at least recruiting agents or cells, if not invading Israel.
Well, one of the things that are apparently going in Hezbollah's way is there are reports recently that they received advanced Russian weaponry.
These are probably not accurate reports, or at least they did not receive any such hardware directly from the Russians. Now, whether the Russians have provided such weapons to the Syrians, and whether the Syrians then went ahead and given them to Hezbollah is something else. But the Russians know full well that if Israel finds out about it, it will attack those weapons and destroy them. The interesting point, if we go back for a second to the terror cell, is whether the Palestinian security services knew about it, whether they have the capability, the cyber capability or the SIGINT capability to know what's happening within the computers of their own residents.
Well, that's exactly the point I want to touch on with you, Shai. What did Israeli security forces know? Is this an Israeli security force failure, or did they know about this unit and didn't let the public know until today?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a failure because, after all, the cell was thwarted. And it's also important to note it's not exactly the first time that Hezbollah has attempted something of this nature. It is perhaps the first time in the recent period, in the current terror wave. But really, in the previous decade, there was a lot of attempts, at least by Hezbollah, to sort of reignite the violence in the West Bank, especially after the drop in violence following the end of the Second Intifada. There was an attempt by Hezbollah to cooperate to a certain measure with Islamic Jihad, for example, in the West Bank, and there was attempt. Many actually attempts that were thwarted by the Israeli security forces. So this is something that Israel has experience with.
Also, the members of this cell were apparently picked up and even indicted a few weeks ago. It was only made public today. And standard operating procedure for the intelligence would be to let the other side guess, try to make contact perhaps through others who are then also picked up.
Letting the other side guess seems like a recurring theme in this story. Shai Ben-Ari following it for us. Thank you very much for that tonight. Amir, you're staying with us, of course, for our next item.
Okay.
The annual meeting of the World Economic Forum kicked off in Davos, Switzerland today. The agenda, including climate change, sustainable development, as well as the refugee crisis and combating terrorism. As always, much attention will be paid to the sidelines of the conference, where global leaders meet to discuss pressing issues. Eli Hochenberg, diplomatic correspondent for the News Today, reports.
Amidst a difficult period for Israel on the diplomatic front, Israeli Premier Benjamin Netanyahu arrived in Switzerland Wednesday to take part in the prestigious World Economic Forum in Davos. This forum attracts numerous global leaders and diplomats every year. This time, Netanyahu is expected to meet both U.S. Vice President Joe Biden and Secretary of State John Kerry on Thursday, in light of yet another spat between Washington and Jerusalem earlier this week, in which U.S. Ambassador to Israel Dan Shapiro publicly criticized Israel's policies. But Netanyahu, according to his past appearances at this forum, prefers to focus on the economic and technological prosperity of Israel rather than political flashpoints.
The future belongs to those who innovate. We had to innovate to survive. And the birth of modern Israel, remember, was an innovation. Israel is not what's wrong in the Middle East. Israel is what's right in the Middle East. And I think our relationship with our neighbors doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. There could be great gain for all.
And the last time Netanyahu participated in the conference, it was 2014, in the middle of his vocal and harsh campaign against the nuclear deal with Iran. Then Netanyahu and Iranian President Hassan Rouhani appeared on the same stage only 4 hours apart in a bid to win the hearts of the international community. Now it is Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif who is representing Tehran at the conference, making his own personal victory lap only days after the implementation of the landmark nuclear agreement.
Yes, let's join into the conversation now. Gideon Kutz, journalist for Call Israel, who is in Davos. Thank you for joining us tonight. Good evening.
Good evening.
Well, of course, we expect a lot to happen on the diplomatic front in the meeting in Davos. Can you give us a few of the highlights that went on in Davos today?
We were waiting first something that will not happen if we understand well. It is a meeting that Turkish sources said will take place tomorrow between the Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Turkish Prime Minister Davutoglu. So there will not be such a meeting that could be a good sign in the relations of the two countries. Maybe it's too early, but Prime Minister Netanyahu will meet tomorrow Vice President Joe Biden and the Secretary of State John Kerry. And there will be a kind of communique after, because there were some misunderstanding recently, as we all know. Today, as you said, it was a little bit the Iranian day. Mohammad Zarif and the Chief of Staff of the President, Nabadjan, were here presenting a new Iran attractive to investments after the sanctions were already ended, and Zarif was asked about his relations with Saudi Arabia, and he accused Saudi Arabia that they invested much money, try to spoil the agreement, the nuclear agreement. But he says now it's time for Saudi Arabia to change its mind and to join us in this new Middle East that he's proposing.
Yes, Gideon, let me ask you.
I asked him if he wants to say something about Israel also. To calm Israel in this situation, he said no, nothing to say.
Gideon, let me ask you, you mentioned Iran, and of course one of the people worried about the Iran deal is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He, some would say, has a lot to do on the diplomatic front. He's expected to meet a lot of leaders there. What do you expect will be high on his agenda in Davos?
Well, I said already there will be a meeting with the American leaders, with John Kerry and Joe Biden tomorrow. There will be a meeting with the new president of Argentina. There will be another meeting with Prime Minister of Holland, some other meetings that are not precise yet, and many economic meetings with HP president, with Uber president, especially also with Kaspersky president. And there will be a highlight from the Israeli point of view. Netanyahu will present the Israeli economy tomorrow afternoon. So as it seems now, from the Israeli point of view, the special meeting will be with the American. Now I can tell you that in this moment, Secretary of State John Kerry is meeting Mohammad Zarif. One can think they met already each other enough times during the negotiations, but they're meeting here also.
Yes, Gideon Kutz joining
really
us.
Really trying to attract everybody and to say we are now the emerging power, you can invest in Iran. This is the Iranian day. Let's say tomorrow, let's hope it will be the Israeli day.
Yes, Gideon Kus joining us from Davos. Thank you very much for that. Well, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry held a one-on-one meeting on the Syrian crisis with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in Zurich today. The two are attempting to pave the way for comprehensive peace talks between Syria's government and opposition scheduled for January 25th. It comes as the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights claimed today that some 3,000 people, including more than 1,000 civilians, have been killed in Russian airstrikes since last September 30th. Amir, any chance for this meeting to change the way the situation in Syria?
Here's a wild guess for you. Hopefully no one will remember it if it doesn't come to fruition. The three of them, Lavrov, Kerry, and Zarif, will get the Nobel Peace Prize later this year, both for the Iranian deal, the Vienna deal, and what is going to happen in Syria. Yes, there is a chance, because if the two powers, the United States and Russia, decide to do it, to go ahead and do it, others will follow suit. Defense Secretary Ash Carter and other colleagues of his met in Paris today and have decided first on a program against Daesh, and secondly, to establish a new ministerial forum which is going to meet next month, the Coalition Defense Ministerial. They are going to hit at the vulnerabilities of Daesh. Up to now, they have contained Daesh, they tried to roll it back, and they are going to systematically hit at Daesh. Of course, this will be to no avail if there is no complementary peace program for Syria. But it seems as if they are on the right track. What is happening in Davos, at the risk of undermining our visual medium, is not that important. These are pictures, photo ops, but the real action is far from there. And the rich are trying to solve the problems of the migrants. It's a bit ironic.
Well, I'm happy you mentioned Davos, because we are staying with Davos, Amir, and you are staying with us as well. Let's take a look now at some of the most important economic aspects of the summit in this report. Here's more.
The impacts of technological advancements such as 3D printing, artificial intelligence, and big data, as well as climate change and the growing refugee crisis, are on the agenda at the 46th World Economic Forum, taking place this week in Davos, Switzerland. In all, some 2,500 participants, including 1,500 business leaders and more than 50 heads of state and government representatives, are gathering to discuss the characteristics and challenges of the changes in the global economy.
The world has a tendency to simplify issues, but we just want to fight this simplification, which may lead to wrong conclusions and solutions. So our role in Davos, which is very different from what's else happening usually in the world, is to take a systemic approach.
On the face of it, what's being billed as the fourth industrial revolution, the digitization of many professions, seems to hold many benefits. But according to a report from the Davos Forum published on Monday, these changes are expected to lead to the net loss of 5 million jobs by 2020 in 15 major economies like the United States, China, Germany, and France. And in addressing these systemic shifts, solutions for massive unemployment such as universal basic income and engaging in new industries will have to be sought. Meanwhile, British NGO Oxfam, which has taken in recent years to releasing an inequality report just before the conference in Davos, found that in 2016, the richest 1% would most likely for the first time own more wealth than the rest of humanity combined, and they see this summit as an opportunity to spark action.
Davos is basically a collection of the world's elite, from governments, from business, wealthy individuals themselves. An awful lot of the power to change this is in their hands, so they need to be persuaded that it's the right thing to do, and if they won't, they need to hear strong voices telling them that they need to do it.
Indeed, Oxfam has found that wealth is in fewer and fewer hands in recent years. They also estimate that $1.76 trillion is hidden around the world in tax havens, and among other solutions, they're calling for governments to take a hard stance on closing tax loopholes.
Yes, next on our headlines now, gunmen stormed a university in northwestern Pakistan today, killing dozens of people during an hours-long siege. While a senior Taliban commander said his fighters launched the assault, the official spokesman for the Pakistani Taliban has since denied involvement. I-24 News correspondent Uri Shapira has the story.
Terror continues to strike Pakistan. At least 20 people were killed Wednesday in a deadly terror assault on Baka Khan University in the city of Charsada. According to Pakistani police, 4 gunmen entered the campus under cover of thick fog and opened fire on students and teachers. All 4 militants were shot dead.
In front of our eyes, many people fell and were in bad shape. I have also heard that many students and some security personnel were also seriously injured and bleeding.
It is still not clear which group carried out the attack, as an official spokesman of the Pakistani Taliban said the Islamist movement was not behind the assault, while the Taliban commander claimed 4 of his fighters launched the attack. Earlier this week, at least 10 people were killed in the Pakistani city of Peshawar by an unknown suicide bomber near a police checkpoint. Peshawar was also the scene of one of the most horrific attacks in the last few years, when 141 people were killed in a school, 132 of them pupils. Following the attack, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif decided to lift the moratorium on the death penalty in terror-related cases. Last week, Sharif paid a visit to Iran after visiting Saudi Arabia in order to ease the tension between the 2 regional rivals. But as Sharif tries to promote peace in the Middle East, his country is once again being hit by a vicious cycle of terror.
Yes, now for more on that story, joining us on the phone from Karachi, Pakistan is Zarar Kuro, a journalist for The Dawn. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. We know that a senior Taliban commander claimed responsibility for today's attack, but then the official spokesman for the group denied involvement. Can you tell us, where does the investigation stand at the moment?
Well, first of all, you have to understand that the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the TTP as it's called, isn't one group. It's an umbrella of groups that was formed in 2007 after the Lal Masjid operation. Now, ever since its previous chief, Hakimullah Masood, was killed in an American drone strike, the new chief, Fazlullah, took over, and after that there have been splits within the Taliban itself. So, on one hand, you could say that this is sort of psychological operation, psyops by the Taliban to create confusion among their sympathizers, perhaps in the Pakistani public. That's something they've been known to do. The other way you can look at it is that, in fact, that the Taliban is further fragmenting, it's factionalizing, and as recently has been reported, some factions have even pledged allegiance to the ISIS chief Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. So you are seeing, due to the sort of decapitation operations that have been carried out, you're seeing the Taliban, the TTP itself, split into further and further into factions. But again, to me, it really doesn't matter. To me, it doesn't matter whether one group of the TTP was responsible or the other group of the TTP was responsible. They are all sort of heads of the same hydra, if you want to look at it that way. And until you actually decapitate, burn the stumps of their necks and kill the body, this is going to continue.
And of course, this isn't the first major attack on a school in Pakistan. Now, do these types of events mobilize the country to put pressure on the government to do more?
Oh, I think there's tremendous pressure on the government. I think that to our regret, to our national regret, I think we woke up to this problem far too late. There was a lot of confusion in the early stages of this war that, you know, is this our war? Is this America's war? Who are we really fighting? And so on and so forth. But the attack that you mentioned, the attack on the Army Public School, in which 144 people were killed, that was sort of a galvanizing moment for the nation. I don't think there's really any doubt in the majority of Pakistanis that these people are our enemies and that they must be eliminated by any means possible. But there's another factor to it as well. You can physically eliminate all the terrorists you want. Ultimately, you will have to address the root causes that create these terrorists. You will have to address the ideology. You will have to address the inequalities. And again, you know, no country is an island. What happens in Afghanistan has a direct impact on Pakistan.
Yes, Zarar Kuro joining us from Karachi, Pakistan. Thank you very much for that.
Most welcome.
Yes, let's go now to London, where we're joined via Skype by Colonel Richard Camp, a former commander of British forces in Afghanistan. Colonel Camp, thank you for being with us this evening.
My pleasure.
Well, Colonel Camp, this attack comes, of course, just 13 months after a similar rampage at a near army-run school. It killed 141 students. Now, 1 year on, is the Pakistani military any more able to contain the Islamist attacks?
Well, I think the Pakistani military have got a very big problem, and that problem is partly brought upon themselves. Because, of course, although the Pakistan Taliban, which presumably carried out this attack, is separate from the Afghan Taliban, the Pakistan government, elements of them, the army included, gave support to the Afghan Taliban and enabled them to maintain a very fierce insurgency over many years. Now, that's given strength to their own Pakistan Taliban and enables them to operate across the border to find safe haven in Afghanistan and to carry out more effective attacks against Pakistan itself. That's not the only factor, but it's a significant one. I think the answer to your question is that Pakistan is going to struggle to deal with this. They have been sort of fairly effective at tackling the Pakistan Taliban in recent campaigns, but this is another example of the great fragility of security in that country.
And how powerful is the Pakistan Taliban? Because we know that in some parts of the country it's increasingly splintered.
It is increasingly splintered, and I think its strength is variable, but to be honest, you don't need a huge amount of strength to mount an attack like this. You just need a number of willing fighters, some explosives and weapons, of which there are plenty, and the direction to do it. So it's not, I don't think, however weak or strong the Pakistan Taliban is, you can stop them from carrying this sort of attack. I think one of the problems they do face, which isn't necessarily good news for us or for Pakistan, is the rise of the Islamic State in Pakistan. Not yet anything like its capabilities in Iraq and Libya and Syria, or even in Afghanistan itself, but growing and drawing away from the Pakistan Taliban and other jihadists, fighters to go and join them, the Islamic State. And of course, they pretty much have a similar cause. You know, the Pakistan Taliban, the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, they have very similar cause. It includes to bring down the government of Pakistan.
Yes, Colonel Richard Camp joining us from London. Thank you very much for that. Amir, would you agree it is possible to stop the Taliban attacks in Pakistan?
Well, it is, but only for a while, and Colonel Camp, of course, knows it from first-hand experience. The Americans call it FPAC, Afghanistan and Pakistan. This is one front, two sectors. And of course, the sectors themselves are then being run according to provinces. The British were in Helmand province in Afghanistan, which is perhaps the most crucial one there. And sometimes you contain the Taliban or the Haqqani network. You don't have to follow the Homeland television series to know that there are so many organizations and so many rivalries. And ISI, the Pakistani security agency, which probably protected bin Laden when he was in Pakistan.
Yes.
Very complicated.
Lots more to say. Amir Oren, thank you very much for joining us for this half hour. We're off for a 2-minute break in the news today. We'll be back. Stay tuned.